Sorry.
No, that's
You're in charge.
Hey, okay, I'll hang. Jeez. All right. Okay, we are here for our District 2 Multnomah County Commission endorsement interview with Shannon Singleton and Sam Adams on one side and the Willamette Week team on the other. Let's start with about a 2-minute statement from each of you. And why don't we start with you, Shannon?
Okay. So really I'm running for Multnomah County Commission in particular, and not another seat that's open this election, because Multnomah County is the largest social service provider in the state. And I come from doing social work, being on the ground for almost 30 years in ending homelessness work, providing behavioral health treatment, specifically mental health treatment to people with severe and persistent mental illness, as well as working with youth in foster care and our families fleeing domestic violence throughout my career. I've also worked in the policy realm and have worked to really push forward initiatives that were innovative and really effective, and that have really data that shows that they work well. I come from a working class family, so I know what it's like to need the services of the county, so I'm not just bringing the professional experience, I'm bringing the personal lived experience. And really, frankly, moving into a space where I think it's time for us to move forward and really address the gaps that we know exist at the county, but also move out of this place that we've been stuck in, where it's just so much finger pointing and arguing amongst politicians and not really looking at what can we do to serve people on the ground and keep that our focus for moving forward. So that's really what's driving me to run, and what I will be bringing is the ability to, from day one, know exactly where we need to invest additional funds and move some additional investments forward.
Great. Sam?
And I'm running because the county is the big anchor right now, the big drag on among governments, local governments especially, in terms of addressing the critical needs of the city related to houselessness, human wellness, and related to public safety. And too often, despite having some great leaders, great staff, great nonprofits for partners, too often the county lacks urgency, focus, good partnershiping, and lacks accountability. And I bring to this the ability to, and experience of taking on big bureaucracies, bringing people together to make change on tough issues and getting results. And in this case, I bring also to the county that city understanding, and these are shared systems. The human wellness and the community safety, cities and county have to work better together for us to see real change. And I'm the only one in the race that has experience doing that kind of large-scale change.
Okay. Perhaps unfairly to both of you, there's almost another candidate in this race, and that's Jessica Vega Peterson. Mm-hmm. We hear a lot from readers and sources and everybody that what's going to be important in next year's commission is having people on the commission who can stand up to what people perceive to be sort of an imperial almost chair because of executive orders about what can be put on the agenda and so forth, and they really sort of bristle at that. And I've seen it just comparing city government to county government. It's a different ballgame. How will you handle the job if you disagree with JVP on an issue? And let's I learned this from the City Club, so now you get to go first.
So when I was on the City Council as a City Commissioner, so first I've been a Chief of Staff, and the Chief of Staff's key role is to make sure that the agenda of the mayor, so Chief of Staff to the agenda of the mayor is cogent, compelling, connected to the community, and that it gets passed. And so I sort of learned some chops in that role working for Vera Katz, who is a very active, both executively and legislatively as well. Then on being elected to the City Council myself, as a City Commissioner, I ran on a very ambitious agenda, everything from reducing taxes for small businesses to requiring for the first time that lobbyists register and report their the lobbying activity. I wanted reforms to what is now Prosper Portland, so very aggressive agenda, and got most of that through as a city commissioner. And that's the relationships you build, with that can stand the test of disagreement. It's about learning to find that common ground or 3 votes. What it comes down to. And when there is that disagreement, you still have another day to work with them on other issues. So being able to disagree and disagree well. As mayor, we were in the midst of the Great Recession. I had to cut budgets from current service level every single year. We had to find resources for more homeless people on the street, more people in need, more requests for basic services that come with the Great Recession nastiness that was. I had a very strong-willed council, and I also had a very ambitious agenda there. I think if you were to ask them, I worked well with all of them, really well. Amanda Fritz, I think, voted no on most of my major initiatives, but I think she will tell you that I was great to work with. Nick Fish told folks before he died, told Randy Leonard that I was the best mayor he worked with because I was the most collaborative.
Okay. Shannon?
So I spent, social work you have to speak truth to power. It's a part of your career. So I've done that throughout my time, even before living in Oregon, but also coming here where first we started the Support Our Safety Net campaign to really push against the city budget that Sam just mentioned, to say you cannot cut our safety net, and we're not going to argue about this for our individual agencies. We're going to look at this as a whole system. And that eventually actually became the Welcome Home Coalition, which then moved forward the first housing bond. And so that work has been a core of how I've shown up in this community and how I would continue to do so. I think I've shown that I'm a collaborative leader, both with my time at the state in working across aisles or ideological differences to get legislation passed and bill budgets passed to support our community, but also in my work when I was in nonprofits. Part of my job was to push the city when all of our contracts were at the city of Portland, and to push the county when all of our contracts move over to the county to really do better. I was the person to stand up the first conversation about equity when we were seeing such disparate outcomes in our providers, where Black and brown folks were just not getting the same sorts of housing placement outcomes as their white counterparts, and really forcing to have that conversation and holding providers accountable to actually doing something to change that behavior. And that's exactly what I would bring into this, is that same concept of pushing people to to get initiatives moved, but also doing it in a way where it's with respect. I think you can see a lot in my endorsements with both the city and county staff and the local AFSCMEs endorsing me for this race. I think speaks volumes to what folks on the ground see as my ability to be collaborative and move this work forward.
Okay. Shan, can you remind us, maybe you said this last time you were in here, why did you leave the joint office?
I left the joint office because it had been an interim position, and I was not interested in applying for the long-term role.
Why not?
Because frankly, I learned I'm not the best at being a bureaucrat. I much prefer to cut through red tape, and I found it really difficult to do so at the time with the joint office in particular, reporting to multiple bosses and them not necessarily agreeing and feeling like I couldn't move forward initiatives that I wanted to.
So just, you both, forgive me, but you both left a couple things out of the voters pamphlet. Sam, you didn't have a statement.
I left it completely back.
Yeah. And Shannon, you left out the JOHS, I think. And correct me if I'm wrong, but did you not list that in your, I didn't see it in your qualifications.
I don't believe I did put it in the qualifications.
Why was that a conscious decision, or?
No, I think it was really focusing on the big broader picture of what I've done over the 30-year career, and not just the 8 months of my career.
Okay, but are you proud of what you did in the 8 months? Is there anything that was
absolutely? I mean, we increased frontline worker wages. When I got there and examined frontline worker wages, some people were making $15, $16 an hour, and other folks were making $20+ an hour, and we were able to get everybody up to 20, so that really they aren't able to qualify for the services they're implementing. I was able to hire an entire leadership team that continues to be there and provide some good support for Dan as he's moving that work forward, and that structure didn't exist when I got there. Additionally, the data systems, just even the dashboard and what would be shown publicly, just showing Tableau dashboards was not user-friendly, and people had to decipher data in a way that they don't have to now because of the work we did to move forward a new community-friendly dashboard.
I think in our debate, did you talk about how you thought there were not enough outreach workers?
Yes.
Was it 4 the number? Or something?
For mental health specifically, yeah.
So that's something you changed. Did you have a chance to change that when you were running the joint office?
I didn't have a chance to change and fund that while I was there, but I did put together the funding calendar so that we actually had a process to fund additional outreach services, retention services, and shelter services. So I set up all of that, but that money wasn't being put out the door until I had already left.
How is it that that's outreach. Look, I'm no expert.
Yeah.
Outreach seems to be sort of the front door to all this.
Mm-hmm.
How can we not have more people out there?
And there are, I think, I do want to clarify, because that's very specifically a mental health street outreach,
okay.
And there are additional outreach workers. I still think it's not enough in the community, and I think particularly East County has less than downtown Portland does, for example. So I do think it's something that we need to expand, but it can't just be outreach for you might have to go into shelter, it's just connected to sweeps. They have to have money to place people in housing.
Is this like a workforce issue or what? There's money, right? There's money.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a unique personality who's going to go do outreach and walk up into camps. I think it can be a challenge to hire for, but I also think we can hire for that. So it absolutely is something I want to expand. And additionally, peer staff is something we're seeing more of, but that's another place that I think we could have peer staff really be working with mental health. And Addiction Association of Oregon has expanded their staffing tremendously. And I think there's a lot of partnership there and looking at how they can be better integrated into regular street outreach, again, with services. What I've heard from folks who are working at outreach but more connected to the sweeps, that they don't always have housing placement dollars. And so they feel like they can't give people what they really need. And that's something that that's a frustrating job, to just keep meeting people. And you got nothing to give them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sam, do you want to talk about, you're a seasoned politician. I think some people were surprised with this little error in the not having a statement in the voters pamphlet. Do you want to talk about that and how you gonna, does that hurt you at all?
Well, it's been a tough couple of weeks for me personally, and I'd like to think that nothing affects me, but that's wrong.
Yes. Phone's not even here. How's that work?
And I'm raising the additional money to be able to mail out my voter's pamphlet statement.
So people will get it.
They'll get it. It's just I made the mistake, so
What's that cost?
It's about $25,000
to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we move along? Nigel, you got a couple?
Yeah. So, Sam, you when you were elected by a wide margin as mayor, you could have held that job for 3 terms, like your boss, Vera Katz, did, but you squandered that opportunity. You went to DC, you came back, Mayor Wheeler brought you in. That ended badly. You've got an explanation, he's got an explanation. We don't know who's correct, but you squandered that opportunity as well, it feels like. So why should voters give you a third chance?
Because when I had those opportunities, I delivered. Now, what happened to my career, and if you're asking that question, then...
No, I'm asking you, why should voters trust you to...
So I ended my term with a 54% approval rating, and I don't think a mayor has gotten near that towards the end of their terms since then. So the point I'm making is that I delivered on ambitious agendas on both occasions, and I ended my time with I ended my time as mayor with a 54% approval rating and had gotten a lot done, and was recognized on the way out the door as having gotten a lot done.
But I guess
And the
I guess my point, Sam, is what I'd like you to address is that you're a person of a lot of skills, and nobody would deny that.
And
you seem to have some self-destructive qualities that make it difficult for you to succeed, and for people, in the case of the City Hall experience most recently, for people to work with you.
so my point is, my answer is that I get stuff done when I have these jobs, and I'm effective. Now, I left my term having completed my term, so I wouldn't put that in the same category of what happened to me at City Hall, which I do have my side of the story, and it is different than their side of the story, and that's the way it is. Did I deliver while I was there? Did I squander the public's trust while I was there in terms of delivering on what needed to happen and what I could do to help make things move forward? I think most people would say that I delivered quite a bit. And part of the way I did that was by creating a very effective team that has stayed on and continued to do great work. So do I have a self-destructive streak? No. I work really hard. And I'm going to do that in the next job as well, and I live and learn as I move along, and I'll continue to do that as I move forward.
So what did you learn from what is the takeaway from your experience at City Hall, for this most recent working for Mayor Wheeler?
Yeah, I've never worked harder, and I work too hard. That's one thing. The second thing...
But you care too much, come on.
No, I worked...
I'm saying you can't tell me that you care too much.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I said I work too hard. You can look at my key cards. I would be surprised if anyone put in more hours than I did. And why did I do that? Because I was absolutely terrified about the shape that things were in. Now, you can make fun of that. That's fine. I happen to be a lifelong public servant by choice. And I fell in love with this city delivering Portland newspapers when I was 9 years old in Newport, Oregon. And I've invested much of my career in this place. So you can make fun of that, and it deserves to be made fun of because it is schmaltzy, but it also happens to be true and borne out by my work product itself. So it didn't end the way I would. It didn't end after I quit the way I would like, but those things were out of my control.
A lot of women that came in contact with you at City Hall said you treated them very badly. Is that true?
There were 3 people that complained.
We heard from others.
Then I would be happy to talk to them, and if they feel like I treated them poorly, then I'm sorry to hear that, and I live and would love to talk to them and find out what went bad for them and learn from that and move on.
So let's just focus on the 3 that complained.
Yeah.
What did you take away from that?
The 3 that complained is I should have had the mayor talk to them. I should have had the mayor have the tough conversations with them, for 2 of them at least. And 1 was a misunderstanding. 1 was resolved even before I knew it was an issue. That's the one that was written by the bureau manager, not the actual person. So they didn't. If people have complaints, then it means the conversation might not have gone as I would have liked. I also had to I don't get up in the morning to make people mad, but I also, at a certain point, working with individuals over a period of time, there's a certain point where I have to move the issue forward.
Right.
In these 3 instances, I was standing up for members of my team, is the other thing, and other people were in the room as well.
So I guess, not to belabor the point, did you take away anything from that situation that would make you a more effective public servant in your next position, whether it's this or another one?
Yeah,
Was there a learning process?
Absolutely. In each one of these cases, it's a learning process. It's very humbling, for one thing. It's I self-critique. Even though in these particular 3 cases, It was disagreements over issues. It's still very humbling, to be publicly called out, and I learn from that and grow from that. It's a different situation to be a staff person than it is to be an elected. As a staff person in this particular case, I had to play the heavy because my boss wasn't necessarily something that he wanted to do or liked to do, so I had to play the heavy. I had to move things along. I had to oftentimes have the tough conversations with others that he didn't necessarily want to have. Do I enjoy that? No, but it is part of my job. It was part of my job when I worked for Vera Katz as well.
Great, thank you.
All right, let me go over here. Shannon, you've talked about how you were a party to a lawsuit that successfully barred the city from implementing the.
Well, Sam's talked about that, yes.
I guess Sam has talked about that. Well, I saw it in a candidate forum where you were saying this is your position. You were proud of this. Mm-hmm. What is your stance on public camping now, and what restrictions do you support, if any?
Yeah, so I think one, I don't support jail as a punishment for homelessness. I think that we are where we are now, and the city is implementing the policy that they have. East County has long had an anti-camping policy, but as I've said, I think to you all before, making it more illegal doesn't change the reality on the street. And so without places for people to go, we're going to continue to see what we see, as opposed to what I think people are trying to affect is addressing unsheltered homelessness. So really my focus is what can we do as a county to increase shelter access, whether that's low barrier, hotel, motel, the alternative shelters, and frankly, treatment is a whole nother component of that. How do we find spaces for people to actually go so that they have other options than being on the street?
So, is this at all a change? Have your thoughts about shelter evolved?
No, I'm not sure where the narrative about shelter came from. I ran the first low barrier shelter in Portland. I started my career working in shelter in Philadelphia. I've never been anti-shelter. I was one of the folks, I was the staff who at the Portland Housing Bureau put together the first plan for shelters for when Home for Everyone started. So I've always been a part of, yes, we need shelter, and the ultimate solution is affordable housing. And so really for me, I want to do what works. We know that shelters work for getting people off the street. We know that if they don't have housing placement dollars and services, then people just languish in shelter. When I ran the Safe Shelter, when I first started, we had no housing placement dollars. We were a first come, first serve, fight to get up this flight of stairs, and if you can make it, you get a bed for the night, but you don't actually get that bed tomorrow. You've got to fight for it the next day. And that type of shelter was completely ineffective in making any sort of change for people. And so I was able to work to change that program where people, once they had a bed, they could keep it. We had a wait list, so it wasn't about a free-for-all of who could get there first to get a bed. We had to move. It wasn't accessible to people with disabilities. And so I absolutely believe that shelter is a part of the system, and I've never been an either-or person. So I think there's been a misconception out there about my stance on shelter, but I also, again, we have to invest in housing because folks can't just stay in shelter the whole time either. We've got to have an outlet for them on the other side.
I'd love to get more definition about
Please.
how you two are different on this issue, time, place, and manner. Can you both take a stab at how you think you're different from your opponent on that?
Yeah, I think, Sam, at least, and please correct me when you speak, but Sam is in support of folks going to jail if that's the outcome, if they don't accept a shelter bed. And I'm not. I don't think that that's a solution to
So what is
the
this,
unsheltered.
what is the solution because I believe that we already are often in the case where there are shelter beds available, and people will say, no, I don't want to go to that shelter bed. So what would you do in that case?
I would really want to be looking at how are we getting back to outreach workers, because that person may not want to go to shelter, but it doesn't mean they don't want support to move back into housing. And so how are we connecting them so they actually get the services they need to move on that path? Running Join, we did that all the time. Most of our clients didn't go through shelter to get into housing. And when I was at the Safe Shelter, the outreach workers, both at Cascadia, when I was at Cascadia, the outreach workers that we had and the outreach workers at Join we're working with law enforcement on a regular basis to address issues in camps, so that if there was a person who was preying on vulnerable people, doing other illegal activities, the law enforcement might be dealing with that person, but the outreach workers were out there to engage the people in actual housing placement services. And that has not been happening for years.
So what about the situation you might have downtown or in a neighborhood where somebody is violating the time, place, and manner? They won't go to shelter. What consideration do we give to the homeowner or the business owner or just the neighborhood where that person is a persistent presence and an unwanted presence?
Yeah, I think that's part of the challenge that I have. I'm not agreeing that jail is the place that they have to go. I think that it has been, traditionally, there has continued to be sweeps, but it doesn't mean that the sweeps happen with jail on the other side of that. It means people are moved along. And that's something that is really hard for folks who are outside, and it's something that the city has done for a long time. So I know it's just moving people around, but that's what we're doing now.
But I guess I'm not hearing you. I'm hearing what it's like for the person who's being moved along or might be put in jail. What consideration are you giving to the people who just want to live, just want to run their business, just want to
use their park,
walk down the street without encountering a person who doesn't want to go to shelter?
Yeah, I think that it's I think that it's been the same that we've had for a very long time, frankly. Again, it's not something, we've not put people in jail in the past, but we have done sweeps. And so people would be moved along and they would end up coming back, which we still have today, even with this ordinance. So I don't think it's working for anybody to do it the way that we've been doing it, and this is just a continuation of that. What I would like to see, again, is how are we addressing the service need, what the county actually can do, and that's what my focus is on.
Okay, Sam.
So the implications of Shannon's position, as I experience it coming from the county side, is you can camp wherever you want, as long as it's a tidy camp or RV, and as long as it's in the public realm and doesn't overly block the sidewalk. So even in front of your homes, and we've had neighborhoods where that's been pretty close to being true. So it's camp wherever you want, because the city, as a result of the lawsuit that you were co-plaintiff in, had to jettison time and place and just with manner. And right now there are, that I helped get in place initially, some emergency orders that prevents people from camping near schools and other things, but those emergency orders I assume will be challenged pretty soon anyway, and at a certain point they don't get to continue, which means we're left with this: you can welcome a tent or an RV in front of your house as a result of, as long as they're tidy. That's what the manner of time, place, and manner is. The second implication of this is you can stay there as long as you want, all things being equal. The first person that was arrested for this was on Alberta. I think it's 27th, 28th in Alberta, and he had been homeless there for 4 years. And he had such a negative impact on the surrounding businesses. And his camp sprawled out. He was not, he eventually got arrested because he violated the manner part. He suffered, he was in the gray area of suffering from, as it was described in the media, suffering from mental illness. His stepfather said that he was sort of borderline mentally ill, and that contributed to him wanting to be at that corner gathering stuff that the city would come in and clean out, and more stuff would come in 4 years. So if he had kept a tidy camp, he'd still be there under the what's left after the lawsuit, which is just manner. So we differ on those two aspects.
So what would you do? What would you do in that instance? So what would you like to do?
Yeah, so I would like to, after 4 warnings, be able to arrest people for not moving, not wanting to move. And that's where we disagree there. I think after 4 warnings, that's plenty, and that's for an actual shelter bed. That's not, and an actual, because I instituted this when I was at the city with my team, that's where we pick up your stuff, help you pick up your stuff, take it to storage. You can come visit it at storage, it's free. You get to reserve the shelter of your choice. We give you a ride to the shelter as well. We help you check in. That's a new process that we did in the 2 years I was back at City Hall.
Do you think we
Could I just follow up? I will confess that I don't really see. What do you see as the advantage or the additive of putting that person in jail?
It's
if you just throw all their stuff in the garbage and spray down the sidewalk, I don't really quite see what the purpose is.
I've seen plenty of that too. I mean, that, because we weren't arresting, I mean, that's what I'm used to seeing. And what I find,
you mean sweeps?
just sweeps where, I mean, when I first came to City Hall, sweeps, there weren't enough outreach workers from the county to help with the sweeps, and we used to
It was city funded at the time. Yeah.
Sure, but
Well, we didn't have enough outreach workers. What we eventually did in November of 2022, when the 5 resolutions were passed, is we budgeted for 50 city outreach workers. But what I saw is people weren't taking our offers because the offer we were making was really terrible. And so we went to the enhanced offer that I just described to you. What I see is happening that when they're engaged with the system, it gives them a chance to reflect. It gives, hopefully also, more importantly, a chance for the system to join them and get them diverted into, as they come into the system of being arrested, that there's also those outreach workers, and tries to get them to see things differently and to see the opportunity. There is, for some people, the experts will tell you that with the accountability does come different perspectives. It does generate different perspectives in people. But it also is for the other people impacted by this, like this fella on Alberta that was there for 4 years, and his parents tried to help him. He just wouldn't. So this, I see this as being an intervention in a way.
I guess I'm just not seeing. I sort of see what you're saying about like at least in theory, for the person who is arrested, they may have a chance to spend a night in the clink and rethink the error of their ways, I guess. But I don't quite know what it does for the neighborhood, because that person will then be released and move back to the same street corner, unless you plan on keeping them in jail for a very long period of time, which I don't think is legal.
Interesting with this fella, the story's still not over for the fella on Alberta. He didn't come back. After 4 years there, he thought that was his corner. He didn't come back. So I'm not saying this is a panacea. I'm saying it better balances all the interests involved, and it is an opportunity for diversion out of homelessness. And we don't have that as dramatically with sweeps where they simply walk away.
Did he characterize your position about camp anywhere as long as it's tidy correctly?
No, I think that's really, it still lacks that connection to services piece that I'm talking about, which really, again, felt different to me years ago when we were working more hand in hand with law enforcement. So that it wasn't just a sweep of move people along, it was we would know days ahead of a camp being swept, so we could go out there and really work to support people. And that is still missing, even with the current structure of the outreach happening through the city. And a lot of those folks, again, those peer staff that I've talked about, really need access to those housing placement dollars as well. Because once they make that relationship with somebody, they can actually continue to serve them. And that's what I think we're missing. I think since we have this, it is what we have. I agree with the sheriff, let's collect some data. I'm invested to know how much does it cost us each time, a jail bed per night for these folks. how much does it end up costing us on the other side when our service providers are paying fines to make sure to overcome that barrier to their housing. So I think there's going to be a financial impact to our system of this policy, and if we're going to be doing it, I want us to be tracking that information so we can have a thoughtful discussion about the pros and the cons and really come to what might be the next iteration of how we address unsheltered homelessness.
So a small point, but an important point, because it does point out sort of this weird finger pointing, or however you want to describe it, what the county does and what the city does, and how the county doesn't want to get its sort of hands dirty with sweeps. That's crude and not as sophisticated as what's really going on, maybe, but it is how I felt. We would love to have had county outreach workers. When I got there, there were no county outreach workers, so we hired our own outreach workers. Everything I just described, including the outreach workers, we use sweeps as a diversion into shelter as an opportunity for that. And again, that's how I see the arrests as well. It's more dramatic, and maybe in this case with this fella, it made a difference because he didn't come back.
But he went somewhere.
But it is camp wherever you want. I mean, by the lawsuit, it's in the newspaper. They described it this way: it is camp wherever you want, and depending on where you want to camp, because the emergency rules still apply, and it is stay as long as you want, because the city would just until you're swept. And in this particular case, an arrest will be more dramatic and I think more impactful for the folks that are really determined to stay, like this fella wanted to stay in Alberta.
Yeah.
The county keeps releasing these reports that say things are getting better. They released another one this week.
Mm-hmm.
Even for the four of us who are used to dealing with the county and looking at some of their reports, they're very hard to decipher. And depending on what part of town you're walking or riding or driving in, some places look better, some places look worse. So what is the single metric that each of you would look at or point to and say, that's the single most important metric, and that's how I would judge the joint office? So Shannon, we'll go with you first.
I think I have to go with two because they go hand in hand.
Okay.
It's the placement, but it's also retention. I'm very interested in how many people get housed and then fall back into homelessness when rent subsidies end, if it's short-term rent assistance, or for some other reason return to homelessness. And I think that's something that is a hard data point to explain, but I think we have, and I don't think we've done a good job of talking about that, the importance of it. And I don't know that we've actually funded a system to do that retention work. A lot of times people are housed, and we hear this from landlords, right? They feel like people get housed and then services walk away, and we've got to do a better job of not walking away once we house somebody. So both that placement and retention feel really vitally important to me.
Was that what happened with Move-In Multnomah?
I'm sorry, I get the move-in Multnomah, and then there was two.
Well, the one I was looking into was Move-In Multnomah was going to cover a year's rent for 200 households, and I saw there was a couple articles about there's criticism it didn't have enough support, like case managers. That was something you worked on, wasn't it? That was the
Move-In Multnomah initiative. Yeah, that started before I got to the county, but yes, I worked on it when I was there as well. And part of it was a lot of folks were using it as a year rent guarantee, so a voucher for a year. Really, the big thing for me was the landlord incentives. So I think being able to pay a higher security deposit to give somebody a second chance, doing risk mitigation, which we had a lot of success with when we ran that at Join for the Ending Veterans Homelessness work, was really looking at and just guaranteeing landlords, if there are damages, we have funds to pay for that, to just give that opportunity to somebody. So I think some of the other incentives are what I would have preferred, but we did leave that to providers to decide and work with their own landlords about which way they wanted to implement Move-In Multnomah.
So did that end? Did it end?
That initiative ended. That's where I can't remember what JVP's initiative was. It sounded pretty similar,
Okay.
And something Multnomah. It was a very
Yeah.
similar name as well. So the Move in Multnomah initiative ended. However, what providers are required to do, and this comes to the accountability and data tracking for the joint office, is they're required to provide retention services for 1 year post-rental subsidy. That is generally not what's happening. And I think we have got to either have a real conversation about what they need to get that done so that they can provide those services, because we also need to continue to have landlords be partners. And if they're getting burned over and
Yeah.
over, they're going to walk away.
Is that a problem because Multnomah County is not running this directly and it's working through nonprofits and contractors? Is that the problem here?
I think it's an underfunding. So I will tell you, when I first got to Portland and I was a placement worker, I was placing people, but I also then had to do retention services for all them. So at some point you hit a plateau where you can't house more people because your caseload is so big with folks that you're providing retention to. And a lot of providers, the county does not fund their retention services. So I think we've been focusing so much on that kind of front end placement and not paying enough attention to that support and that retention work.
Okay.
Do you have a different answer for
Yeah.
the metric that you would?
3 interrelated metrics. One is the percentage of people experiencing, or the percentage of people, I believe in the functional end to homelessness. And so that's where the number of people that are becoming homeless is no greater, no less than the number of people that are ending homeless. So I adhere to, and I'll hand out my write-ups on my platform on this. So that's really important. And that requires treating this like the public health emergency that it is. It's by name, it's not anonymous. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes with it that's really great. And that then forces the system to provide not just the housing that's needed, but also the needed services that go along with the housing. Second, they need to be judged by the percentage of people experiencing houselessness that are living outside of shelter. And then the third is for the county, but also back at the city, because again, this is a shared responsibility. What's the average waiting time to get into permanent housing? And when we did that analysis, the county wasn't keeping track. When we did that analysis, it was 5 to 10 years. So that's why there's this cascade. You've got to measure the percentage of people that are houseless but outside, because they're going to be out there for upwards of 5 or more years.
Does anybody know what the hell happened to Built for Zero?
Still going.
I mean,
Yeah.
they don't talk about it at all. I mean, nobody talks about it. I thought it was going to be the panacea. I think I wrote a story saying that. Now we're back to an idiot.
Well, I think it's, it was really trying to pull together a bunch of by name lists, because we had them for
Yeah,
these
the-
different systems,
The
right?
HUD one.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And- okay.
Yeah, and
But-
but that work is continuing, as I understand it, is moving forward. So outreach workers are now collecting similar
By
data.
name.
Mhm.
We're going to get this.
That's my understanding. I haven't seen a
we're the
briefing
largest city that
recently.
I've been told we were the largest locale that they have worked with on
Yeah.
this. So they're
And the toughest.
teething, and because we are so bifurcated in so many different ways, probably a tough one to take on for them.
Yeah, well,
Shannon, there's a perception that because you have a 30-year history in the field, that you're a social worker, that you've worked for nonprofits and you've worked for the joint office, that it's going to be difficult for you to hold providers and the county bureaucracy accountable, because you come from that world, and because you're a social worker, and social workers help people, they don't always hold people accountable. Could you respond to that concern?
Yeah, so a couple of things I would say. One is social workers' job is all about accountability. It is helping people, but it always comes with accountability and boundary setting and really helping people by move forward and not just kind of stay stagnant. Excuse me. I also am a really pragmatic person. I like to do what works for folks who are outside. I want to get people inside. I think that we know there's a lot of different things that work, and I don't care if it means that we're not funding programs. If they're not effective, then we shouldn't continue to dump dollars into those. I want us to really be paying attention to what works, what has the highest outcomes, and how do we either replicate or expand that to move things forward. I think that throughout my career, have had to stand up to people. It's a part of what we have to do in our work, not only individual people, but also systems. And I did that in every job I've had in social work, but also at the state, and working in Governor Brown's office, really looking at how are we going to address our recovery out of COVID from a racial equity perspective. We've really shifted all of that work to be about centering different voices to have access to influence policy and budget decisions in a way that the government had not done before. And that transformational work happened because I sent an email saying this doesn't feel right in how we're approaching this recovery. So that's something I'll continue to do. It's not going to go away because I'm a county commissioner.
What would you get rid of? What's not working that you know about right now that's not working?
Yeah, so when I was at the Joint Office, I started to track the data of what are the housing placement outcomes by shelter type. And we were seeing pretty stark numbers of low placement out of congregate shelter in comparison to hotel, motel, and our alternative shelters, which are all the tiny house sorts of shelters.
I heard the task sites are doing pretty well, right?
When they have housing placement dollars, absolutely.
Okay.
And because there was a blip where the money ran out, and that gets hard. It's, again, having workers go do work when they don't have resources to actually help a person is really frustrating. And so when they have housing placement dollars, they've been effective. We've seen the same at our alternative shelters. So I have a lot of questions about, should we keep putting service dollars into congregate shelter? Is it just something that it's just a shelter, it's just a safe place to be off the streets, and it's not necessarily service rich, or do we need to do something different? But if we're not seeing good housing placement outcomes out of congregate shelters, I really want us to have that conversation about if they should keep getting funded. So that's one big one that's on my radar.
So, okay. What would you whack?
Oh, congregate shelters as the core of the system. You're still going to need congregate shelters, but we spent a year and a half sort of studying this issue of how do we get more folks experiencing houselessness into permanent housing. And as I talked to a lot of folks, my team talked to a lot of folks as we're sweeping people, and they're still saying no to our really good improved offer of rides and everything else, and they're still saying no, and they just did not want to go to congregate shelter. When we asked them, they gave us versions of just give us a place to sleep and not always moving us with basic services. We were prepared to do more than that, and that's how the Safe Rest Villages, which we thought were great, especially for socio-demographic specific, like females or folks with experiencing disabilities, but we needed something that was had larger economies of scale, and that's how we came up with what's now called the task site. And we did that on a pretty good hunch that because we would be giving them services, everything from vision to making sure their meds are developed, and they would be there longer, and it gave them that sort of sense of privacy, and they had their place, that they would stay there longer. And the fact that they stayed there longer, they developed more trusted relationships with what is now Urban Alchemy's outreach workers, and were more likely to say yes to the option to whatever was next step best for them, in many cases permanent housing. So we felt we would, by designing it, we were creating a pipeline where people were going to get into permanent housing from the street in a more effective way than the county was delivering. And so far it seems to be working.
Yeah. I want to just jump back to put a finer point on one thing, because I want to understand this. On the agenda, getting the chair having the veto power over agenda items and approving it, what has to change that? What do you have to do to change that? I think I know, but I want to hear. And would you take that step?
So it requires the chair, which she or he can do on their own, to put the exemption back in their rule that says, while departments have to get clearance for things to go on the agenda, elected officials don't. Everyone up to Deborah Kafori, this particular chair, took out that exemption that had always been in the chair's executive rules that implement the board rules, which say all elected officials can put agenda items directly.
JVP took out
Correct.
the exemption that allowed electeds to put items on the agenda. She did that.
She did that.
So you have to get rid. So either
So
a new chair could get rid of it.
Or a vote of 3 can
And you would-
just overturn an executive rule by the chair.
Okay, so I imagine you'd be one of those 3 if I
Absolutely.
following your.
It's such a small group. You've got to have that creative tension, just like on the Portland City Council, that anyone could put a resolution on to say, hey, I wasn't consulted on the deflection center. I would like to have a meeting where you take our input on the kinds of research we'd like to see done, the kinds of best practices we'd like to see you look at before you come up with your final plan,
Okay.
Mr. or Madam Chair.
Would you be one of the 3 that would vote to take that?
Yeah, I would, and I think the other piece is, I don't want to, I think that JVP could have been doing a better job as well of just bringing people in. I think we've heard a lot from sitting commissioners that they didn't have line of sight to what the conversations with the deflection center, same with the EMTs. And so it makes me question how they're actually working together, not only at board meetings, but what's happening behind the scenes and how can we actually be more collaborative and looking at working together to get issues solved.
I think they broke Oregon public meeting laws with the group that was meeting behind closed doors to deal with deflection. There's a lawsuit about that.
Yeah, I'm not clear. I haven't seen who all was at that table, so that's not something I'm sure with the public meeting laws. But I know
It was
that
the sheriff and police chiefs from Gresham and Portland, a few advocates, the DA-elect, the DA.
I really think that I guess I would say, why wouldn't they just have those in public? I feel like public
would you
meetings.
have had them in public?
I would have. Most of the work that I've done has been required to be public meetings, and I think we have to stop being afraid to have transparent and tough conversations in a place where the public can view us. That's part of our job as elected officials.
Okay.
Imagine do the same. Go ahead. Yeah, jump in.
So it's unusual for us to have 2 really strong candidates for a job like this. Often we have none. So for the benefit of our viewers, could each of you take 30 seconds or not much more than that and tell us why you're a better choice than your opponent? Who's going first? You're the moderator.
You went first, though. You went first on, let's go here.
We can't expect a white knight to come riding in with a whole bunch of money. We got to be using the money we have right now better. And when you look at local decision making on budgets between Home Forward, between Multnomah County and the City of Portland, we're talking $700 million that's being spent for direct pure homeless services, for a little bit for housing, mental illness, which is a big impact with homeless services or with the homeless community, and then also substance abuse disorder. We need to, and I will just go ahead and pass it out in great detail. We need to dig into that. We need to treat it like the emergency it is. It needs an incident commander. The city, the county, and Home Forward need to agree that one person is in charge who needs to be at the county, in my opinion. And you dig into that money and you reprioritize it, and it's right now being spent in silos, and there's scant accountability. You get these news releases that a slice of it is doing really well when the overall outcomes are not. That can change. It is government's secret superpower to be able to, in a bona fide emergency situation, to make quick changes and to get this, which can be done here. It meets more than meets the legal definition, and reprioritize, look where there's gaps and overlaps, and get more money, because they're just, as we sat in these meetings, there are so many cul-de-sacs. The deflection center, the sobering center, and everybody falls off the cliff. You've got to dig into the $700 million, and you have the opportunity to look at it, reprioritize it, and fund a lot more services along the continuum than we are now. If more money comes from the state, if more money comes from the federal government, fine, but we can't have a policy just based on that.
Shannon, why would you be the better choice?
So I think I'm the better choice, both because of my experience on the ground, but also because I'm a collaborative leader. I, again, have that track record of bringing people together to move something forward like I did with the Rose Quarter Compromise. I can sit down with people, elected officials from across our jurisdictions in that case, and community members to come to an agreement on moving that project forward to get a cover design for the CAP for that program. That was a conversation that the governor asked me to step in and facilitate. That's the kind of leader I'll be. I know how to bring people together and not really come at this with the old politics of the divisiveness and the finger pointing that have continued to go on. It's one of the things I hear most from voters is how are we going to have somebody who can not only work with the county commissioners but with city council as well, and I'm that leader.
Can we have a little crosstalk?
Yeah.
So this requires big problems, big change, big solutions, and it all works through a bureaucracy. So that's what I bring. I've already talked about that at the beginning. At the debate that we had, when I raised the fact that the lawsuit has the impact of camp wherever you want, stay as long as you want, in more cases before the lawsuit for sure, you said, well, that's a city problem. I'm here to talk about county issues. And I thought that typified the kind of separateness, the enhancing of the separateness. What happens on the ground in terms of sweeps and EMTs coming to so many calls for people in experiencing houselessness. And the sweeps have all got to be part of this continuum. The county can't continue to pretend that sweeps and managing camps on the ground is like that they're allergic to that. It's got to be part of it because, you know, the police and EMTs have more contacts with folks experiencing houselessness and mental illness and substance abuse disorder. They do now, and they will continue to. And if you don't bring them into the tent as part of the system, and that $700 million does not even include the value of the costs of EMTs and police officers. We're just wasting an opportunity to have a full system.
So yet again, Sam is incorrect. What I said that about was his diatribe around housing production. You were talking mostly about how the city needs to. I'm speaking right now, please.
Yeah.
You were talking about how the city needs to have more housing production, and my response to that was, that's what the city does. What we're here to talk about tonight is what the county does. So that is not correct of what I said, and I really am going to ask you to stop lying about me.
So I didn't lie about you. There was one sentence on housing and about 7 sentences on the lawsuit and the impacts on the city's ability to do its job.
Quick question, then we got to go to our fun question. So Metro is moving toward a measure for ballot next year that would divert some of the SHS money to housing. Are you supportive of that idea? If not, why not?
I am supportive, but I don't want it just to be look at development. I think we have to look at preservation and, again, land banking. The cost of land is such a driver of a cost driver for housing development. So I really want to make sure that it's open for those multiple options and not just going into new development.
Wait, would you define land banking in this case? Because I was going to ask, I have a question about this.
Yeah, so I think it can look, I mean, the way that, go ahead.
Is it literally land or buildings?
It can be either,
right, okay.
In my perspective.
Yeah.
So we've done it in the past where it's been a hotel that's used as shelter, but with the opportunity to convert it to housing.
Okay.
So that's one model. Another one that we bought while I was at the county is a parking lot. So it could be used for car camping,
okay.
But it's opportunity and zoned that it could be developed into housing. So I think it can be land, but it also can be an existing structure.
Okay.
So your position on this idea?
Yeah, I support it. Also in the packet there you have my approach to increasing housing production, and I would add to the resources that could come from the changes at the Metro Tax levy. I also propose in there that other voter-approved initiatives like the Portland Clean Energy Fund, that we look at up to 50% above what they forecasted when they were championing the levy to go into an affordable housing fund, and also for preschool for all, and also for the arts tax and all these other levies. I think that has two benefits. One, that can be a lot more resources than just SHS on its own. And two, it provides some needed accountability to the folks that are pushing forward on these measures that in many cases we're experiencing are raising revenues way beyond what they initially proposed. And right now our housing production is really at a dead stop of, as reported by the Oregonian, 500 units, and we need about 6,300 units this year.
We're out of time.
Okay.
One fun question, right?
Yeah. We let Aaron ask this.
Fun for
I'm the
us
fun
or fun
one.
for you?
You're the fun.
We'll start, each of you will get to answer this, but Shannon, we'll start with you. What were you like in high school?
Oh, I played all the sports. So I was a basketball player, softball, soccer, and track. So I was busy. But I was also friends with all of the different crowds. Like the Burners didn't understand why I was friends with the Jocks, and the Jocks didn't understand why I was friends with the Burners. But I really just hung out with everybody.
Okay. Sam?
I was in student government, no surprise. I ran track and cross country. I was voted, we had funny awards, not serious awards, and I was voted most flirtatious.
Congratulations.
Right. All right.
I want to make sure, let's see, I have your birthday. I think I have, Shannon, I have yours. You 47. Let's test this.
Oh, yes. I thought you were saying
not
the
born
year.
in 47. No. I was born in 47. I feel like it. I feel like it right now after. And Sam, you're 61.
Yeah, just turned
Yeah,
60.
just beta testing my spreadsheet.
Your math?
here.
Oh.
It just makes it easier. It's I was correct. So.
Great.
Thank you very much.